Why the F are there so many pro homeschool videos / channels on YouTube?
Great. Excellent.
Hello. I am Miss Andrea.
I'm Miss Mare. I'm Jordan.
Miss Jordan.
Yes, sure. We are CheesePress Publishing.
Yes, we are.
And we are here to live stream with you again today. Usually you would see the two of us.
Or
Jordan.
But
We have an Ann.
First time on the stream.
Putting your face next to my face next to yours does not make us look more alike.
there might be similarities.
Are you sure?
Because I
Like, no, I look like my father.
So, we are exhausted.
Yes.
We spent the entire day putting up 3 Christmas trees.
On November 11th, yep. 3 Christmas trees.
Starting
At 11/11, which
Yes.
we got a screenshot of because
Yes.
that was wild.
11/11/11/11.
So we put up 3 Christmas trees for our local festival of trees here that kind of gives visibility to the local businesses. And so we did one for our not-for-profit, we did one for CheesePress, and we did one for the Rotary Club, of which we are members. And
That's what the third one was for.
yes. And so we're tired and sore. But Miss Shalance, who is behind the camera, was reading some interesting things to us.
Entertaining us while we put up trees so that we could have some fun conversations. We're like, maybe we should probably live stream this.
Yes, yes. Since we're going to do our best to live stream on every Monday, we figured while this live stream won't be long because we're tired,
right.
we're going to go ahead and talk about this. So,
Indeed. All right, so what is our prompt?
Alrighty, so I'm going to censor it. It says, why the F are there so many pro homeschool videos / channels on YouTube? Now that I work for this and stuff, my algorithms are homeschooling, and I haven't seen anything negative about it. If anything, I see help videos for homeschooling,
right?
But I've never seen anything negative. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. So they go on and say, I understand that YouTube works on algorithms, but for F's sake, when you search homeschooled kids, you get nothing but straight propaganda. And of course, these are not my words. This is _in_veneer_veritas on Reddit. Anyway,
interesting.
Going back to whatever they
That
said.
sounds like Genshin.
I don't know what any of that means, but
They go on and say there are almost nothing about homeschool abuse nor about the negative impacts of homeschooling and the isolation it brings. At best, homeschooling is a nuanced topic, but it frustrates me that it's so one-sided. Any thoughts? So a couple of comments under in which this person said, miserable mode 4-2 dead. I can't wait until I'm 18. My life wish is literally a family so I can raise my kids and be the most loving, kindest father I can possibly be and send them to school and do everything I wanted as a kid right now. And then they continue to say, because to answer your question, it's just because all these idiots have a hive mind, basically. One video is published and they explode for views since all the other moms just subscribed. They also probably make content a lot of the time since they have no effing lives, but just controlling their kids and forcing them on camera.
okay.
Then another person says, homeschool parents have time to set up channels and they have an audience of other homeschoolers or parents who wish they could homeschool. Of course, those parents only see idolized versions and don't know the reality for many of us. Not to mention how many of those homeschooling bloggers and YouTubers are trying to sell a curriculum or something to other parents. They are incentivized to keep producing content that makes homeschool look idealized. I think that's what it is. Idealized. My bad. And so then the last one I read, unless you want more, says, I don't know, man. It's always these overly religious, crunchy moms who homeschool their children because God told them to. They never seem to talk about the issues with homeschooling and only give each other praise. It's one-sided. There are no issues with homeschooling. It's literally perfect. If a mom quits homeschooling, she was too weak and defective to figure it out. I'm sorry, I didn't. I just read that. How embarrassing. If a child grows up saying they hate homeschooling, they are rebellious and defective. Could never be my child unless it is, in which case I don't know what I did wrong because I literally did everything right in life for them. There's nothing more perfect and wholesome and sacrificial as homeschooling. Other homeschool parents tell me so every day.
Bruh. Okay.
So many thoughts, so much to address. Like we should have done this
if
one
I
at a
may,
time.
I have made numerous videos on my personal channel about the downsides of homeschooling. One specifically I made in 2020 called An Apology to Homeschooled Kids. No, the algorithm did not pick it up.
It didn't.
That's fair.
So the algorithm is part of what's going on here.
So for the YouTube family, that should be linked down below if you want to check that out.
Right.
Yeah. I was like, okay.
Okay, before we dive into the homeschool specific, because there's a lot to unpack there, I will point out that social media, being what social media is, it lends itself to this behavior in every facet of life.
Absolutely.
Anybody who's comparing their life to what they see on somebody else's social media channel is doing it wrong, because people are putting their best selves forward.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's going to apply to homeschooling, and it applies to everything. That most people who are putting content out there are polishing it. They're making it look pretty. They're trying to give you the perfect image that they can
you
craft.
have a visceral negative reaction to people's beautiful homeschool rooms.
I do.
That's fair. Those things are strange and culty.
Well, and they nothing comfortable about them.
Right? I was like, first of
Why
all,
would
why
you
do you
do
have this
that?
room in your home?
I love a good expedite room. I'm sorry. I love a good expedite room. I love a room with expedites and bins with the papers and the books.
It looks like you can't live in it. It looks like if you go and move something, like a hammer is going to be brought down on you. And no.
We didn't have one of those.
But that, so,
the guest room, there's nothing perfect about that room.
No, when it was a guest room and we just had the wall of bookshelves, I could walk in and grab a book and put it back.
That's fair.
but
That's
were
a
you homeschooling
library.
in that room?
It was a library.
No.
Were you homeschooling
Absolutely
in that room?
not.
No.
That was storage.
No, that's where our guests slept and there were books to read.
Yeah.
That was your storage.
Yeah.
Every once in a while.
I'm good with organized storage,
Yeah.
but to expect a child to function in that perfect environment and be a child? No. So I'm going to start out with the caveat of this really is just the nature of social media.
I agree.
Now, so I'm hacking some of the homeschool stuff.
That was a lot.
Every single one of those comments absolutely points to a subset of the homeschool community.
Yeah, that's fair. I didn't say anything that was incorrect.
No, I lied.
I mean, it's so as the original poster commented and noted.
Do you want to back up and hit those comments one at a time? That was a lot. I can't remember any of it.
Oh, I remember most of it.
I remember most
so
of it.
Okay,
The point that I was going to make, we can go back and hit each one in just a second. The original poster had it absolutely correct. Homeschooling is nuanced. And each one of those comments, which we'll go through in detail in just a minute, each one of those comments did, in fact, point to a particular subset of the homeschool community. And there are absolutely groups, divisions, sections of homeschoolers that can fit into each one of those categories. And then there are plenty of homeschoolers that don't follow any of them. But, okay. Start back with the original post. Let's...
so I'll read and you can hold up your hand when you want me to stop so that way I'm not...
Excellent.
Okay. Saying that YouTube works on algorithms, but for F's sake, when you just search homeschool kids, you get nothing but straight propaganda. There is almost nothing about homeschool abuse, nor about the negative impacts of homeschooling and the isolation it brings.
Okay. Hold it.
When I research homeschool kids, I usually get some social media person talking to a homeschool kid, telling that homeschool kid that they have no social lives. Like what I get.
Right.
So
Some of
it's
that is-
often homeschool kids trying to defend their homeschooling. So but here's the thing: everyone
Gets a different algorithm. Everyone has a different experience.
right.
So there are absolutely homeschool families that do operate in isolation.
I've known some.
Yeah.
I've stopped speaking to some.
Yep. There are absolutely
I've been
homeschool
tempted to
families
call on some.
that operate in isolation. And some of the things, if you go over to our YouTube channel, we have confessions of the previously homeschooled. And some of those conversations, Jordan is a frequent guest on that. One of the hosts of that, actually, not really guest, she's host of that. And one of the things that they talk about there is how intentional you have to be to develop a community. How you have to be mindful about building friendships and maintaining friendships and those relationships in a way that you wouldn't have to be in a traditionally schooled environment. Not all families do that. That is, some people a reality of homeschooling. However, more often than not, I feel like that's a stereotype.
Yeah.
Unsocialized homeschooler, I don't know if that's as much a reality as that is a perception.
Over socialized homeschooler.
Yes.
My word.
I was like, socialized probably more than most people. We spend a lot of our time very actively being places where other people are.
Right.
Now there are times where I'm like, I didn't see anybody for 2 weeks, but I was very happy to do so.
Holidays are usually just a downtime period.
Yeah.
I just remember Jackson coming to me and saying, can we set a stricter schedule where we're out of the house 2 days a week and in the house 3 days a week and then have our weekends? Because I'm tired. Like, I had the kid come to me and go,
That sounds
too much
fantastic.
socialization. I'm gassed.
As introverts, naturally, both of us, we were both like, I'm tired of others.
People. Oh no. Oh, yeah.
So another video that I did on my personal channel was specifically about the documentary called Shiny Happy People.
Yeah, watch that.
Shiny happy people.
Go ahead and watch that.
I don't know that I want
Neither
to.
shiny nor happy. I mean,
Yeah.
what was horrifying is that all the bad things that they showed about homeschooling in that video, I've seen it all
Yeah.
Yeah.
in pieces.
Here's the thing. All of the isolationist things about homeschooling is usually cult adjacent.
Yeah.
I was like, that's not homeschooling, that's an entirely adjacent but separate problem.
But a lot of the imagery they showed, a lot of the problems that they showed, I was like, oh, I was a click away from that.
Yeah.
At some point.
I was
a
like,
click away
you've
from that.
seen it as a homeschooler because
Yeah.
they exist.
Right.
But there's usually a secondary
Oh,
thing
our church
happening
taught
there.
that.
Yeah. There's always a secondary thing going on there.
Yeah. It's
the same like public school. Like, hear more of the negative on the public school side. They're like, I had a pretty great high school career, middle school, elementary school. I was still trying to figure out stuff. Like, I also understand when I hear people horror stories or what the ideal that they have, and I was like, yeah, that applied to someone. That applied, or I was a stone's throw away from that being me too.
Right,
So I
absolutely.
think I can see how it is, because how the public perception of things can be.
Yeah, it's not the schooling, it's the other problems surrounding the
Yeah.
people who are
Right.
doing the thing.
It's the family. It's
The
maybe
community.
the religious ideology, maybe political ideology,
It's-
maybe.
the bad stuff happens
Absolutely.
when, just in my experience of watching for 20 something years, a parent or parents feel insecure in their ability to homeschool their children on their own steam and then look for other people to lead and guide them. That's when those cultier, slippery slope things start
that
happening.
is an inroad.
Yeah,
but
that's
here's the thing:
cultishness.
when parents don't know a subject, they have to be able to go and find
I'm
additional.
not talking about a
subject.
subject. I'm talking about the whole thing. Like, you've been to homeschool conventions.
I have.
My early days going to homeschool conventions,
I've never been
just
to
walked into the Cobb Galleria, and there's, books for as far as the mouth can see. And then there's these two convention rooms on the side.
Right.
And one's like, how to parent.
Right.
And I was like, I think I got this. The
Right.
other one's like, how to get your child to blah, blah. I'm like, I think I got that too. When you start deferring parenting to the crowd,
Right.
Yeah.
things get weird.
I accept that. It's different than feeling like you aren't capable of necessarily homeschooling
I
entirely
mean, we
by
run a
yourself.
homeschool program. I would be self-defeating.
Right.
But when you start deferring your ability to parent to what the crowd is doing, there's a problem. Homeschool, as a homeschooler, most homeschoolers didn't like me. And that told me that I was maybe doing things more right. Because there were some here was like, you're not doing enough of this. And there were some here going, you're doing too much of this. And I'm like, sounds just right to me.
It's when the community runs your homeschooling more than you are. That's generally the problem, is when your community is the homeschooling and not your homeschooling and you have communities that you are involved in.
Right.
That tends to be the issue.
If your community dictates your homeschooling,
Then there's a problem.
rather than your family values deciding which communities you're going to engage in.
If it had been up to our community, you wouldn't have gone to college.
Yeah.
You would have been cleaning the house. I never made you clean the house.
I'm not good at it, so that's step one.
If it was up to our community,
Is it the church or the...
church,
Yes.
people would have had you scrubbing the house. And the homeschool people wouldn't have let you go to college.
Yeah. Fair.
I think also to piggyback off of like talking about algorithms and things like that, it's really easy for the minority of something, for the positive of it to be pushed more, and then the majority of something for a lot of the negative to be pushed out more. And so homeschooling for my world is a minority way, not for minorities, but I'm saying it's the smaller alternative education option, if that makes sense.
If you're
So,
going
of
to
course,
pick on something, pick on what's in power.
yeah. Of course, with public school,
So we're picking on public.
and school, because it's what majority of the people know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously going to be a target for the negative before it's the positive, because it doesn't have to defend why
Well,
it's there.
so
it's just automatically
first
there.
off, it's the
default.
And then second off, that's where your educational power is. That's who's controlling all of these conversations.
Right.
And I mean, I imagine that factors into some of the algorithm stuff.
And that's why I think, because I know, not trying to make it about race, but I know as a minority, I'm so quick to say, this is what is great. This is what we do offer. This is what I can do. This is what I have to fight against. This is me. Like, so I can imagine as a homeschool unit, it's like, we're not creepy people. We're not weird. We're not this and that. This is how you can
I'm certain I
educate
have
someone.
a dozen videos that say that. And or I'm not one of those homeschoolers.
Yeah. And there's also the fact that homeschooling isn't a monolith. So, like, things that are very bad about it are not going to be same from one very bad case to the next very bad case. So, like, if you just, like, see someone, like, coming out of, like, Mormonism or something like that, there's a lot of similarities of why they left.
Right.
There's not one bad homeschool experience is not the same as another bad homeschooling experience, and so like the community for anti or getting out of a thing is going to be extremely different.
Because for some young people, and I've spoken to many, for some young people, their problem with having been homeschooled is that they felt that they didn't pick up a decent worldview. For others, they felt that as they hit 9th, 10th grade, that their parents were insecure in those academics and just said, you can do it on your own. And they could not.
Right.
And others, it was just crunchy. Well, that's the crunchy religious thing that they say.
And that, again, is a secondary adjacent problem.
Right.
So if someone is talking about anti that thing, they'd be talking about anti having a crunchy granola mom who also decided to raise me homeschooled.
Right.
The main problem is not the homeschooling itself. The homeschooling was a symptom of the main problem. So
Likewise, when once a year we get a really bad news story, of someone who's killed their kids,
Right.
yeah,
or gotten them close to it,
Right.
and that's not because they were homeschooled. They didn't kill them because they were homeschooled. They didn't get away with getting to that point because they were homeschooled. They saw homeschooling as a way to hide that they were abusing their children, and used it that way. They used homeschooling as a tool. Homeschool didn't cause it, but they used homeschool to cover it.
yeah. The ideology behind the abuse was the problem,
Right.
not the homeschooling.
Now-
That was
Yeah.
a symptom.
I will say this, because while you certainly
Still
have
horrible.
Yes,
you certainly have the varying ways that homeschooling can go wrong.
absolutely.
I do think that there is a common outcome. I think in almost every case, what you're dealing with as a young adult then is an educational deficiency of some kind.
Yes.
How many young homeschoolers have I helped get their GED?
Right. Because, and I mean,
If they come to me
ultimately,
and say, I
whether
didn't get what I
it's,
need.
you know, we had, growing up, my family had this worldview, and so we were taught X, which doesn't align with what most of my peers understand to have been, you know, educationally sound. Or my parents got to 9th grade. I said I no longer wanted to do math because that was horrible. And they said, okay, because they were done fighting. Well, now we still have an educational
I
deficiency
mean,
in
my
math.
mother got tired of fighting me to go to the dentist. and I had to pay for that later.
Right.
Like, you don't tap out, parents.
Right.
It's going to cost somebody something, you know.
Or whether it's, we had this whole crunchy granola vibe thing going on, and so then at the end of the day, that's a different educational deficiency. So I think once you're...
See, but I've always thought I was crunchy granola.
I mean, in a different way.
What is crunchy granola for the people in the back?
I have an earthier, more like natural philosophy of you just leave things as they are. You leave humans as they're going to develop.
Yeah,
they're supposed to be.
Here's the thing.
You don't impose your will on them if you can avoid it.
You understand the scientific process, and you understand how to vet scientific knowledge to a point where you're not going to get pulled in by the latest fact.
Oh no,
Yeah.
that's not
So
gonna happen.
crunchy granola is going to be like all of the woo-woo, like alternative health, which can encompass all manner of using herbs, essential oils, crystals, all kinds of wild things, but not in a scientifically sound way.
It's the hippies for millennials.
But not in a scientifically sound way.
Yes.
So instead of, say, being interested in essential oils, seeing what scientific research there is about them, and deciding that, hey, we're going to use some essential oils, it's like we're all in on that train, and we would never go to the doctor because we're going to solve everything with all the essential oils. And everybody in the family has got to take everything. And
Yes, it goes from the crystals can help maintain the energy in this house to the crystals are going to be a substitute for this broken leg.
Right. So when you're dealing with the crunchy granola, it is, when used as a derogatory term, we're talking about somebody who's taking those very healthy, very homesteady sort of ideals to extremes that can be
Because I definitely started off my parenting journey very earthy, very homesteady, but I'm also a huge book nerd, and I also don't just read one thing. I read the opposing information and usually land somewhere, which is why I tick everyone off.
Right.
I think it's kind of beautiful to tick everybody off.
Well, piggybacking off of that, but bringing it back to the socialization and kind of sort of what they were saying earlier,
Right.
Or the lack thereof, I think that is one of the... So, I'm trying to figure out how to make this make sense in less words. So, when that conversation is brought to, let's say, a public schooler, and the unwillingness to bend or to understand the other side, that translates to us as they're not well socialized because they're not used to being amongst people who have differing opinions. And I'm not saying that's the same thing in 2024.
So I didn't follow. Who is the they?
The they, what do you mean? Public school versus homeschool.
So a public school student is speaking to somebody who was homeschooled.
And if they're not, let's say they're crunchy and then they're just not hearing, not crunchy, but you know what I mean, using your term, I'm trying to use it.
No,
they're
coming
crunchy.
from one of these environments that has some kind of worldview that's dramatically at odds.
And especially how they express it.
Mm-hmm.
And
if they're not willing to...
Our experience of talking to a homeschool person who has been in a bit of a bubble, that conversation has always been more of them being confused.
I mean, I've encountered some that have been confused, and a few that were just like, well, that's what you know. Like, you don't understand. This is what we've researched. This is what my parents said.
Yes, you have. Oh, yes, you have.
But this is what my parents said. This is what's going on. So
I
we're
will
just
give
like,
you names later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're looking at them like, boo-boo the fool.
Here's the thing. So you have two responses to these environments. And the thread that we're reading off of and the comments that we're reading off of is one response to growing up in this environment, and that's a very reactionary response. So some of these things are kind of borderline almost abusive. And when you have those kinds of cycles, one of two things happens. The child's going to learn how to replicate that, or the child's going to behave in a reactionary fashion. these comments are coming from reactionary people. When you're saying that somebody comes back and is reinforcing the propaganda that they've grown up with, that's somebody who's replicating that cycle.
And that seems strange to the outside. In this context, I would call us outsiders.
Right.
So it seems strange to us because we're sitting here like, I can go to Google and figure, you know,
Right?
what are they talking about?
It gets weirder and harder as time goes on.
Yeah.
Because things get less provable.
And
I mean,
I'm
more and
sitting
more
there like-
provable or less provable. And so you're like, how did we?
And then they'll say, this is going to heal the cells. And I'm like, well, I knew the mitochondria was the powerhouse. So, okay, all right. You know, we don't know. But like, or now, again, speaking from my past growing up in it and talking to people, because I don't, like, I have a better understanding now in 2024. But during my younger years in middle school and high school, even elementary school, because I think I only counted one elementary school where they were taken out, like in pre-K or kindergarten, and put back into like second grade or something like that. Not everything, but a common response that I've heard or common reasoning is this child needed something different. Either they had attention issues or they were trying to figure out what was going on because they were different. So at the time when I was in school, you didn't really hear a lot of diagnoses for like ADHD, ADD, OCD, autism, and things like that.
Macon also wasn't a center of homeschooling. Not like Atlanta
I'm not
is.
sure.
Yeah.
But
I don't think it was.
But because let's say you got someone that was touched with autism, let's say that was a thing, when they got around the public schoolers, it looked like they weren't socialized, but in actuality, that is because of what they are diagnosed with, not because they weren't socialized with.
Currently, right now, in this day and age, in homeschooling, it is very neurospicy.
So that's why on the outside we're looking at it like,
parents of autistic kids are like homeschooling. Be in a homeschool room, and there's a reason the kids talk over the teacher. There's a reason the kids talk over each other. There's a reason that you can tell a kid to be still and they'll only be still for 10 minus 2 seconds. Like,
so, but I think that's going to be a different group than what this Reddit thread is generally kind of.
No, I was bouncing off of Shalandra's experience. That
they were talking about like, you know.
So, and again, so you're talking because there is such a variety of experiences in the homeschool community, such a variety of reasons why people homeschool, such a variety of home life experiences that are involved in the homeschool community. That's going to be a whole different set of discussions when you're dealing with various types of either learning challenges, giftedness, neurological differences, whatever those things are. That's going to be a different beast entirely, because the Reddit thread, ultimately, the people who are commenting on it, the people who would consider themselves, I guess, homeschool survivors, that's coming from some other kind of deficiency in the household. There is something happening in those families that is not indicative of homeschooling, but is certainly homeschool adjacent.
And just from my experience, I'm going to start with depression. A parent who is kind of homeschooling and it wasn't their idea. They were told they had to homeschool, so they're not doing it with their full back. But yeah, definitely depression in a parent, illness in the family, or just a level of religiosity that is a leaning toward the extreme. And there are human symptoms more so than homeschooling symptoms. For example, there was a family in my public school. Actually, there were a lot of families in my public school, but there was one family in particular where the kids were just so sheltered to the point that if me as a girl walked too close to one of the boys, he would jump. He would fall out of his chair, off the other side of his chair, to not be touched by a girl. And so I saw that in public schools growing up. I saw kids who just had, like, the introversion was real, or the religiosity was, like, most of my best friends never wore pants to school. So now these people would be homeschooled, but in the 80s, these people went to school with everybody else. And
I mean,
so
there were some people being homeschooled in the 80s.
Not in New York, not in Yonkers, or at least I saw all of these things that people are saying that are indicative of homeschools now. Right. I saw all of those in my public school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's the other
thing.
thing.
I was friends with everybody because that's just kind of how I roll.
Right. But that whole discussion about socializing and a person's social skills,
kids were social skills were horrible.
I was gonna say, I went to high school, in a public high school, with a whole bunch of people who had no social skills, and I'm sure grew up to be really wild individuals.
I've said on my channel many times, children socially act like their parents, and if you see a weird homeschooler, it's because mom and dad are weird. Me and my husband are a little weird.
That's fair.
Mm-hmm. But we're just a little weird, right? So I'm not here to defend homeschooling. I'm not here to say that the people who were like, what the belief is happening, are wrong.
Right.
I'm just here to say, yeah, but, or yeah, and.
I think it's okay to defend homeschooling.
Yeah.
It's just
not the way they were homeschooled specifically.
No, I do not appreciate the way people have. As someone who is homeschooled for academic excellence and still helps other people homeschool for academic excellence, I have very little tolerance for people not teaching their kids.
Right.
So, I mean, that's just me. So I'm not going to defend poor homeschooling or different homeschooling. I'm not going to defend it.
Right. Because at the end of the day, it's what did their child come out of the other side of it with.
Right.
And how capable are they of functioning in the world with the rest of us?
And if at the other end it's negative, then you did a bad job, and that is your fault.
Yeah. Now, and the reason that I literally talk about this on my personal channel at least once a month is because I want parents to see how they can slip up when they mean well, how it starts out well and things get weird. I want parents to be painfully aware that if you're homeschooling your kid and they don't get what they need, it's your fault.
And there's certainly more ways to do it wrong than there is to do it right.
Right. Yes. Yes, there are.
Because, I mean, when I went into homeschooling, both of my kids were struggling so much emotionally that I said, well, I can't do worse than what is happening right now.
That's right.
And then as they reached each milestone, I look back at them and I'm like, back to school, and they were like, nah, get out of my face.
No, she did very, on regular intervals, go, are we done homeschooling? Are you going to go back? And it's like, no. I'm at the beginning of Gen Z. This is where the school shooting started. Nah.
Right. And so I just want parents to understand that if you are in fact going to homeschool and your child gets a raw deal, it's your fault.
Yeah.
If you fall off, or if your child goes, I don't want to do those things, and you go, okay, I'm going to be happy parent.
It's not going to end well.
When your child's 22, they're going to come back and get in your face and tell you that you suck.
Right. And so, with all of this being said, because the outcome really is the point. Mm-hmm. So, I have known a whole lot of families that are very into the homesteading, that are very into...
I mean, I know some that are beekeepers. That's really cool.
Right. The essential oils, the herbs, all of that kind of stuff, but they do it from a responsible place, and they've turned out amazing kids.
Yep.
And their kids are grounded, and their kids are ready to face the world.
I know some homeschoolers who I was side-eyeing, and those kids came out amazing.
Right.
So how do you
world
judge?
View by itself is not going to screw up the homeschool kid. Even some of these sort of alternative approaches to doing life is not going to screw up the kid. At the end of the day, if the parents are in tune with the kid, things are going to turn out okay.
And as long as you
And
give
if
them
the
enough
parents-
science to pass a college class.
If the parents are being selfish, and or if the parents fall into a deep depression and don't do anything to make sure the kid's okay, because honestly, at least 50% of the kids who get a raw deal, it's because the homeschooling parent fell into a deep depression.
Yep.
And at that point, somebody should have recognized it and gotten them to put that kid in school.
Yep. And that could be a failing of the homeschool community itself.
Yeah.
Because we've seen kids
Because
that
that you're okay,
were
you're okay, you're okay when you're not
parts-
okay.
Right. Who were part of a community and the community didn't see that change and point that out. Because oftentimes when you're inside of that, you're not going to see it. You have to have somebody outside telling you this has to change. And that is a drawback of the hyper supportive homeschool community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they're like, this is going to turn out okay, when no, this is
And
not
so,
gonna turn out okay.
interestingly, I give advice that says, if you're homeschooling and your family is not supportive, don't tell them all your business, because they're going to get in your face and say, that's why you shouldn't be homeschooling, blah, 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 blah. However, if your sister is homeschooling her kids and you see that your sister's not okay,
Right.
get your sister some help.
Yes. But at the same time, if you don't have kids, or if you've made the decision that your kids need to be in a traditional schooling environment, and you have family members that are homeschooling, don't just outright judge that and be like, that's a terrible idea, that'll never work. Be as supportive as possible. Sit back and watch that process. And then you can be a voice that can identify if there are serious problems happening beyond just, oh no, they made a different choice than I did.
Yeah, I feel like, based off what we've said, the catch-22 there is that because we can be defensive, because we are a minority group defending a thing that we're very passionate about, sometimes that can lead to us not taking the cues or pointing out a problem when somebody, especially because individual families are homeschooling, so me being like, you're doing something wrong could come off so bad so easy.
That can come off as a personal attack on your family.
Yes, so there is a little bit of natural defensiveness that I will admit exists inside of homeschooling that can let those things slip through the cracks,
Right.
which can end in a bad situation.
And so at the end of the day, as a homeschooling family, the key is you have to have regular checkups.
Yep.
Parent to child.
Find
How are we
doctors
doing?
who are supportive of homeschooling.
Yes.
Because my children's doctors helped me make some major
That's fantastic.
decisions. That you went to college as early as you did because your doctor recognized that you were bright and told me not to give you a gap year.
My pediatrician?
Yeah.
Oh, I did like her.
She was like, gap year, my foot. Let her go.
That, and we were going to kill each other, but that's a different
I mean,
thing.
yeah, you were 16.
Yeah.
Well, nice.
I was like, around that age it becomes Fight Club. But that's everybody.
It is.
But it's a little exacerbated when I see your face all the time.
Wow.
It's not that I got to college and went, wow, my parents are so much better than some people's. Maybe I'll go home.
I remember.
Which is why, because that is one of the things that homeschooling can be problematic with.
Yeah.
Is you do not, if you have a problem with your teacher, too damn bad you're eating dinner with them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is no escape from that. There's no being able to diffuse problems out. Like a traditional schooling environment, especially when you get to high school, you probably have more than one teacher. And so even if you have problems with a teacher, and even if those problems are super serious, because they sometimes can be, you still, that's not the end all and be all of everything, and then you don't have to go home and stare those people in the face.
The smart
before
homeschooling
bed.
parents should be trying to do it all themselves.
I mean, true.
Yeah.
That's just too much for anybody.
Well, and one of the pieces of advice that we give on our channel is when you are having difficulties with the relationship with your children, because the relationship with your children is the most important part.
Yes.
And that is the root of all of these problems, is it's actually the parent relationship with the child. It's not the homeschooling itself. But when you are in a situation that strains the relationship between the parent and child, that's one of those times you have to farm out whatever it is that you're doing, because
Middle
if
school.
if you as the parent become the bad guy, that affects everything else.
Yeah, I did not need to teach my children middle school.
No.
I needed to have my middle schoolers like me. And not like me like I need to be my children's friends, but I couldn't have my middle schoolers dislike me.
Right.
Like that. But it's interesting because when you and your brother were getting ready for college, I think he was a rising senior and you were a rising junior, and I sent you guys away to a week camp. I sent you both away to a camp one summer. You went to a camp at the college you ended up going to.
Oh, that camp. Okay, I was like, well,
And he ended up going to SCAD.
I don't go to camps.
And y'all came home and y'all were like, hey dude, we don't want to hear nothing about our behavior. We are perfect angels.
I was like, I've never seen better kids in my life. What are you talking
No,
about?
you were like, you and Jackson were like, we are the bomb. Not a word about us. And then 2 years later, I guess y'all came home for Christmas break and you were like, y'all don't suck as parents. I'm just saying. Y'all don't suck as parents. So, I mean, you're going to get the reward eventually. But, I mean, you just have to focus on the relationship with your child more than anything. And it's better to put your kid back in public school than a homeschool for the sake of being right about homeschooling.
Right. Yeah. If the relationship is suffering, if the household dynamic is suffering, then that something has to change.
Yep.
All right. Is there anything interesting in there that we haven't touched on?
I'm sorry.
The hive mentality.
I hate hive mentalities. I don't care what kind of hive mentality it
Yeah,
is.
no, echo chambers
I
are
didn't
terrible.
like middle school
Social
for a
media
reason.
has made echo chambers worse in all areas of life.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. If you're homeschooling, you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of the echo chamber. You have to intentionally guard against that, much like you would guard against it in every other area of your life. If you get sucked into your echo chamber, then you are never going to see the problems that are happening.
I think that's why I said I was glad that I knew that there were homeschoolers on both sides who disagreed with me.
Yeah.
So if this group of homeschoolers don't agree with what I'm doing, and this group of homeschoolers don't agree with what I'm doing, and I'm over here in the middle, it made me more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I guess comes back to the defensiveness. If you feel yourself becoming defensive and you cannot analyze why, just assume that you're wrong.
You're connected to people for a reason.
Right. Well,
You know.
and also intentionally make sure that you have friends outside of your particular worldview.
Yeah.
Whether that's educational worldview, whether that's a religious worldview, whether that's a political worldview, whatever it is, make sure that you intentionally cultivate relationship with people who do not share your point of view.
And people,
I have something else.
Okay?
Sure.
It says the short answer is that there are a lot of money to be made in selling insecure people the idea that they're naturally better at something than anyone else.
See, that's the part that I'm confused about.
But understand,
They're
so
going from
understand, there's this ideology with homeschooling, with a lot of homeschoolers, where they do feel like I'm the best person to teach my kid. I'm this and I'm that.
I don't feel like any of those people are naturally insecure.
But at the same time, there's the other side who feel that homeschoolers are nuts. And I think that's the kind of comment that we're
think so,
dealing
too.
with.
I mean, maybe, but I don't know people who believe that they are the best person to teach their child who are also insecure about that fact.
I think where the commenter was coming from is more of like the religious perspective.
Maybe.
I think what they're trying to say is that it's very easy to sell someone inside of a worldview the idea, the validation that they are right, and pipeline them farther down that road.
Yes.
And there's lots of easy money to be made there.
So
I think that's where the
accept-
comment
okay.
came from. I don't accept the way they phrased it.
I'm going to give the 2024 disclaimer.
Uh-oh.
She grabbing it. She touched. She.
She's trying to find
There
the
are
summary.
so few of that type of homeschooler left.
No.
they are outnumbered more, if that's what you mean. The ratio.
Like, I
has
don't
skewed.
run into that. Well,
The ratio has skewed.
the ratio is skewed.
I think the ratio of
I don't
them
believe that
have
those
skewed.
numbers have gone down. I just think that the people who are very concerned about educational quality have gone up.
Right. But okay. But
So the
but
ratio
but,
has skewed.
but like
It's much harder for them to not get called out, and that might make them more insular. To be entirely fair, the ratio of people who are educating their children properly has gone up, and thus the people who are doing it for improper reasons might be becoming more insular in order to avoid criticism.
okay, I don't have a defense for it. I do agree that you're not seeing both sides of the story. I know I've been speaking about both sides of the story for a while, but those videos don't get no hits.
Which, again, might be part of the problem.
Might be part of the problem.
Like, we're not at all denying that these problems exist. I'm just like, we're editing and critiquing the
And you know
manner
what?
in which.
Interestingly, because we work in history, and YouTube says, the YouTubers that come onto YouTube and tell you how to YouTube say, when a video hits, do more of that.
Right.
So if it were up as far as history is concerned, I would just talk about George Washington and Abraham Lincoln all day.
Or the British royal family.
Every day. Oh yeah, those
Yeah.
do really good.
Yep.
And there are a lot of historical things that I wouldn't touch
Yep.
because they don't get the views. I feel like I purposely let our YouTube channel suffer because I refuse to just stick to the shiny, happy history.
But also, I guess what aggravates me about this whole thing is that there are many upsides. And so why should you feel bad about covering what you like about it, how to help people with it, what's the, like, I understand that there is a bad side, but you can cover that too. But it doesn't mean that homeschooling is horrible.
Well,
Again,
and
I tied it into, yes.
No, I think one of the reasons that we make videos where we highlight problems in homeschooling and we talk about how to address those problems in homeschooling and maybe how to decide when homeschooling is not the correct choice.
Because we've made that video
Made that video too. Is because
Didn't do well.
if it didn't do well, because when all you see is how perfect it is, when all you see is how wonderful it is, then you're going to miss the mistakes.
Yeah.
And that is how you wind up with a bad outcome. And that is how you wind up with kids like the commenters on this thread who are so anti-homeschooling.
Well, they're sick of it.
And yeah,
They're over it.
sure.
And they deserve to be able to say that.
Right.
And that's why I go on r/homeschooling every now and then and read a homeschool horror story, because in reading it and in commenting on it, you can see that point where things just went bad. And I want parents to recognize that in themselves if that is happening.
Because when you are in the middle of it, you have the
We
opportunity.
can both love homeschooling
Yeah.
and caution against it getting off
Because
track.
here's the thing, when you are in that moment, if somebody points out, here's a place where this can go wrong, and you see that in that moment, you have time still to correct that.
Yeah. I believe a unique vulnerability of homeschooling is just connected to the parent-child dynamic. Because people would react just as defensively if you were critiquing their parenting.
Yes.
Oh,
And
okay.
thus, unfortunately, the schooling becomes a aspect of their parenting.
It is.
Yep.
It is a lifestyle.
And I was like, I think that is a unique vulnerability of homeschooling. That it's hard to critique or tell someone something that is going wrong without offending them.
Yeah.
So I was like, they're not wrong.
As
It's
someone,
just that.
as someone who was known in our homeschool community, like your friends' parents came to me and they would say, "We see where you got, the sibling into college. We see that you didn't pay much. We see where the other sibling is heading. Can we talk? And we sit down and start talking. They start talking to me about parenting. And I'm like, I don't care about how you parent your kids. Like, that's not what we're here to talk about. Well, my child plays video games too much. And they mouth off at me. And I'm like, but college.
Those need to be unrelated.
Like, I'm not going to tell you how to parent. And finally I was like, pick the most egregious habit and work on that. But you're not going to change all these things about your kid up front.
Right.
But I thought we sat down to talk about how to get the kids in college.
Yeah.
You know.
I think homeschooling is done best when you can separate entirely your parenting dynamic from your teacher's
But those
dynamic.
parents couldn't.
I'm just saying, as someone who very successfully homeschooled, I did not think of you as my teacher.
Well, I will also...
Even in the high school years?
And especially not in the high school years.
But y'all came to me and said no more outside classes for academics.
Yes. And at that point, you had raised us to be so self-sufficient educationally that you did very little of the heavy lifting.
I did a lot of paperwork.
You did a lot of paperwork. You did a lot of finding outside resources. You always had a way to help us. You did not teach me much of anything.
No, I didn't. Oh,
So-
there was a point where you were smarter than me.
So, but this whole conversation, I think, is what makes it so important that there are videos out there about the problems with homeschooling. Because it is hard for the community to correct a family because it is so intrinsically tied with parenting, and it can be such a touchy subject. And so if you don't have videos like this that talk about the problems, that talk about how to address them, that talk about how to identify them, to talk about the outcomes if you don't correct them, then your families who are homeschooling might never understand it until it's at the point where these commenters are, until it's too late, until we're at the end of that journey, and now, well, I guess you have to learn how to learn as an adult.
The good news. There's good news.
But so these videos should, I mean, and the only way that that's going to happen is people need to like, to share, to, adjust the algorithm so that these videos are the ones that show up, because these are powerful tools for families that are homeschooling so that they can avoid some of the traps and some of the pitfalls.
I mean, literally, if you want to find videos about bad homeschooling, look for bad homeschooling. But I was going to give us some good news on the horizon. I have noticed that a lot of homeschooling parents and children are working on mental health.
Yes. That is
Thank
an
the
extreme.
Lord.
That is an extreme improvement.
And that's gonna fix a lot of that.
Yeah, because a lot of the problems stem from poor family dynamics. And so as the cultural move is towards stronger mental health and toward talking about mental health and toward that not being this wild taboo topic, that's going to make family dynamics stronger, and that's going to do more of this interacting that y'all did while homeschooling.
Accidentally.
And the whole checking in, are we doing this correctly? What do we need to change?
Yeah,
what do we
I
have
had
to...
a process every summer.
Oh, yeah.
Every summer I would just be like, bring me all the books and go away. And Leslie was like, time to what was it?
I'm the hyperfixate.
I'm the hyperfixate.
And he just started throwing stuff at her. Like, do this too. Do
Yeah.
this too.
Have you looked into this? And so I spent the first month of every summer planning the next year and then running it by you guys.
Yeah.
And things like that. I don't think that a parent should be the nexus of the homeschooling.
I do not feel bad about saying good things about homeschooling. Ever. I was homeschooled from the time I was 7 to the time I went off to college at 16. It worked extremely well for me, and I think it worked extremely well for other people. And I think saying the good things about homeschooling shows people how to do the good things about homeschooling. All I'm saying is the negative and what not to do, they're not going to know what path to take instead.
Fair.
I think my path was extremely good. It worked extremely well for me. If you have an ADHD child, I think it will work well for them, especially if they're extremely self-sufficient. I do 1,000% acknowledge that some of my friends did not come out as good as I did.
Right.
And that is their parents' fault.
Yep.
But I understood from day one that if this did not go well, that there was no one to look at but me.
Yep.
I took that very seriously.
That's fair.
I was terrified. You should be scared.
Homeschooling is not something to take lightly.
It's not for the faint of heart.
No. I think lots of people can do it. I think there are lots of good ways to do it. I think you should be aware that there are more bad ways, and that you should be afraid of doing it wrong.
And if you are not wholly committed to it, or if at any point in the process you feel yourself checking out, something has to change.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like when people ask me why I like skateboarding or how I avoid hurting myself. Commit to the second you bail on something is the second you get hurt. You have to commit to it 1,000%. You'll hurt yourself less that way.
Yeah.
That was the
So
longest
don't you have a
half hour of my
website?
life.
Huh?
Oh, website.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
huh? I don't know anything about
Okay,
this.
so our website where we create and sell educational materials is CheesePressPublishing.com.
Create and sell is what she said. I heard
Create.
in sell.
Create and sell
This.
educational products and also novels is CheesePressPublishing.com. Our YouTube channel is CheesePress Education. I personally am on YouTube as Miss Andrea. If you want the dirt, that's where it lives.
I am not on YouTube by myself.
She is not.
I am only on CheesePress Education, and I am perfectly happy with that.
Yes.
I don't know what my YouTube channel is called. And it's not about homeschooling. It's about art. I'm sure we will put in a doobly-doo somewhere.
What do we do? Okay,
A
sure.
detail section.
Yeah.